from the campus of Christ Cathedral in Orange County, California. EWTN presents Bookmark, Special Edition, featuring Bishop Robert Barron and Word on Fire Catholic Ministries. And now your host, Doug Keck.
And welcome to a special edition of EWTN's Bookmark, coming to you from the Freed Performing Arts Theater on the Christ Cathedral campus in Orange County, California. I'm Doug Keck. Today we welcome Bishop Robert Barron. He's the auxiliary bishop of the Archdiocese of Los Angeles and founder of Word on Fire Catholic Ministries, as if he needs an introduction, but he just got one. We're also joined on set for our first segment by Father Steve Grunlow, and he's the CEO and executive producer of Word on Fire Catholic Ministries as well. Thank you so much, Father, for being here. And we'll also be joined later on the program by Matt Leonard of Picture Show Films. He's the director of Catholicism, The Pivotal Players, Word on Fire's latest series, set to premiere soon, actually in November on PBS. People can look for it sometime after the election. And for those of us here, we actually had the privilege of seeing Francis, the first episode of Pivotal Players. And of course, everyone will remember that EWTN first aired Bishop Barron's Catholicism series back in 2011. And it's amazing that it's that many years, 5 years now. And we've recently aired his series, Priest, Prophet, King. And this month, in September, we will air Catholicism again under the title Bishop Barron Presents. So a whole litany, and welcome Bishop Barron. And thank you, Father Steve, for joining us here. And thank you so much for Bishop Van and the Diocese of Orange to invite us to come here tonight and tape this very special bookmark and give due credence and support to the wonderful work that Word on Fire does. Thank you so much, Bishop, for finding the time to be with us.
Well, thank you. It's always a privilege, Doug, to be on with you.
Now, Pivotal Players, let's talk first about Catholicism and how we got into this. Now, you're out here in California. You're working in Chicago. Father Steve was also tied into Chicago. How did the two of you get together and get involved with this ministry?
Well, he was one of my best students. So I was a professor at Mundelein Seminary for many years. And very early on, Father Steve was a student of mine, and he was a brilliant student. Then after he was ordained, we became friends. And then when I started doing my early work in media and evangelization, he was on the ground floor. And so when Word on Fire started, I consulted with him, worked with him. And finally, Cardinal George, who was a great mentor to both of us, assigned him as a priest full-time to Word on Fire to operate really as the CEO, so I could do my work as rector of the seminary, et cetera. So all these years, he's been very involved and has been now indispensable in the production of these latest shows.
Now, Father Steve, we've heard his version of how you met. How about your version of what it was like the first time you met now Bishop Barron?
Well, when I first met him, I was impressed by his ability to captivate his students with his intellectual prowess, I would describe. I'd never experienced a teaching experience as I did in his classroom. So that's what impressed me about him. But we were kind of early on able to have these kind of in-depth, intense theological conversations. But some of the most important conversations we had were about evangelization and how not just to speak about it in the abstract, but to actually do it.
Now, Bishop Barron, you were ordained, I think it was in 86. Mm-hmm. Your first book was in 96. Is that the one on St. Thomas, as I recall?
Yeah, my doctoral paper, which is read by dozens around the world, that was published a little bit earlier.
Oh, okay.
But my first more mainstream book, yeah.
Right, so that, and Aquinas is one of the pivotal players,
yeah.
And you seem, from I had the great opportunity of watching all the programs, to see you have a great affection for St. Thomas Aquinas, and that comes out in his particular episode. But when you were thinking about the priesthood, was getting involved with the media part of what you saw happening? And if not, how did you find yourself?
Yeah, it really wasn't in the beginning. I mean, I'm a diocesan priest for Chicago, so I saw myself working in parishes. But then pretty early on, I got the sense of, the academic life and probably teaching in the seminary. I probably saw myself, honestly, as maybe teaching in the seminary for a time, then going into university work and that sort of thing. It was Cardinal George who was very instrumental. When I was looking at the possibility of teaching at university, I was offered some positions, and he said no. And I was disappointed, but he said, I can see you being very successful teaching at a university and directing doctoral papers, but I don't see you just walking around a campus with your black briefcase, he said. I think there's a bigger audience for you. And I think he intuited the importance of evangelization, to a wider audience. And that's how I kind of got into it, was with his encouragement. And then my own sense that we had to do something, inspired by Mother Angelica, inspired by Fulton Sheen and many others, that we have to do more. We Catholics have to get in the game. And so I just decided to start. And, I mentioned the mustard seed principle in the Francis episode. It was a mustard seed thing. It began with asking WGN Radio in Chicago, which was a big secular radio station. I said, what would it, cost to have a little sermon show? And they said, we can get you on at 5:15 on Sunday mornings for 15 minutes. And it would cost you $50,000. So I went out and raised that money, and that's how it started. And then someone said, I think your sermon should be on a website. And I said, honestly, what's a website? I didn't know what it was at that point. And so the website got started, and that's really how Word on Fire got underway. Right. Actually, Father Steve, sitting next to me here, is the one that came up with the title, Word on Fire. Because I've come to light a fire on the earth. That was a big theme for me. And so we were thinking it through, and he finally said, Word on Fire. So that's where it came from.
So when did you first move into doing video?
The video started in the early 2000s, like maybe 2002 or 3. I started filming some retreats and lectures I've been giving kind of on the road. And then EWTN, thanks to you, began to show those. And that's how we really got rolling. But early 2000s, the video started.
Right. Now, Father Steve, we know that Catholicism has been not only a great success in the sense that millions have seen it around the world, and it also has been very successful, I would say, in a Catholic market that many times doesn't purchase DVDs. This was a very popular series. From your perspective and working with Father on it, why do you think it was so successful?
Because it's beautiful. I think that's the appeal of the Catholicism series, and really all of the Word on Fire materials, that we try to make them beautiful, because beauty is a lure, it's a route of access to God. And when people see something beautiful, it's compelling in an almost transcendent way.
So, Father, you moved from that big experience of doing that. That must have taken a lot of effort. So were you quick to want to jump back in and do more? Had you thought about just extending that series? How did you move into the pivotal player idea?
We did an episode in the series on the saints, and we did a portrait of 4 female saints, actually. And I loved that episode, and it got a very strong reaction. And I know just from a lot of experience preaching and teaching that narratives compel in a way that strict ideas don't. I thought, why not now express the Catholic thing in terms of these literally pivotal lives? So yeah, pretty early on I had the idea of doing a follow-up to Catholicism. Now what happened was, in the middle of our filming, I'm named a bishop, and that threw everything off, because we had started filming, we had 6 of them done, and then suddenly I'm named a bishop and I'm sent out here, and so things were interrupted, and now we're getting it back on. But no, I wanted to do a follow-up right away.
Right, and that's also why I believe you were started with, 10, then you were looking at 12, and you decided to get the 6 out you have ready, right?
Right, we had the 6 filmed, and the editing process had begun, and we thought, well, now we could just wait and then film the rest of them and bring them all out at once. And we thought, no, why don't we just get the 6 out that are close to being finished?
Now, will you travel a lot when you do these, and people, as they saw in the Francis one, and they'll be seeing, if they buy the DVDs or see them on PBS, I believe the 2 will be Francis and the 1 on Michelangelo, right? You travel a lot, you're there, you're in those locations. It's a personal teaching for you from the spot of where these things occurred. You also talk about, in one of the programs, I forget whether it was Francis or which one it was, the Yeti Theory of God. What is the Yeti Theory of God?
That's probably in the Aquinas episode. Yeti, the Bigfoot. Some say there's a Bigfoot, some say there isn't. Let's go find out. As though God is one being among many, as God is some being in the universe that's hidden, and some say he's there, or some say he's not. It's precisely the wrong way to look for God. So it's like the Russian cosmonaut back in the 50s that went up into space and said, I've been up in the heavens, there's no God. As though any informed Christian would ever say, that's how you look for God, by finding him among the beings of the world. So Thomas says God is not en summum, highest being, but ipsum esse, the sheer act of to be itself. God is the reason why there's something rather than nothing, not an item within the universe. What happens in the minds of many of the new atheists, the old atheists too, is they see God as some being. So that's the Yeti theory. We have to change the way the question is posed.
Recently, there was a Pew study that was just out. In fact, you responded about that Pew study.
Oh yeah, the very recent one.
And
Yeah.
it recently happened about the falling away from the faith and the different things going on. Father Steve, as a student of the bishop and as a younger priest, do you think there's an attraction to the young people to the kind of programming like a Catholicism would have, or Pivotal Players? Why do you think it appeals to young people, or does it?
First, I'm deeply flattered you refer to me as a younger priest, as I'm moving into 20 years now. Why do young people find it compelling? One of the things I think that works is that there's a visual orientation to the way that we seek to answer these questions. That now people learn via screens. And so that's where knowledge is imparted, that's where it's delivered. And Bishop Barron, I will say honestly, is a master of the delivery of the content of the faith via the screen, be it the television screen or the computer screen. Mm-hmm. That he's just able to communicate through that particular technological medium in a way that young and old find compelling.
Right. Now, in reaching out the way you're reaching out right now, you started podcasts and radio, and you're doing the TV, and you still do the homilies, right? Mm-hmm. And you send out those e-blasts and do those kinds of things. So for you with Pivotal Players right now, how do you plan to get it out there? You're going through PBS. Why did you decide to take that approach? Now, they carried some of the Catholicism episodes, right?
They did. And when we were filming this series, the first one, we used to say, we want this to be at a PBS level of quality, PBS, we want it to be high level. And so when we got home and we finished it and we saw the work we had done, we said, well, what do we have to lose? Why don't we send it to PBS and see if they like it? And I must say, I'll speak for myself, to my great surprise, they said, we love it, And I thought they'd find it way too Catholic and way too, but they took it and syndicated it. Mm-hmm. And see, part of my goal as an evangelist is to get out beyond the walls of the church. I love reaching out to Catholics, and I want inactive Catholics back and all that. But I'm also very interested in the people outside mm-hmm. the church. The YouTube videos that we've done now for many years, I like that about YouTube, is it gets you way outside the confines of the church. PBS now is a vehicle for getting mm-hmm. the message of St. Francis, Michelangelo's theology, which is in his paintings and sculpture. To get that outside the walls of the church, I think is a great thing. So if they're willing to help us with that, I say terrific.
Now, Father Steve, so you ran it on PBS. Did you get that kind of reaction? Were you surprised at the reaction either from the stations saying the response they got back or directly people contacting the ministry?
I think when it was airing on PBS or when they decided they were going to air it on public television, I thought, well, maybe a few affiliates will pick it up because of its religious content. And then most every affiliate picked it up. And that utterly shocked and surprised me, which demonstrated to me, well, there's a hunger for this particular content. In the manner that we presented it, in the way that it was delivered, they liked it, they wanted it. And what we learned from our conversations with them with Pivotal Players was they want more of it.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting too, because recently you also came out with something where you kind of called out certain aspects of the church, teachers and theologians and apologists and catechists. Why did you call them out?
Well, it's that Pew study you just referred to. And as I say, I was just sighing with exasperation as I read it. It's a survey about young people and why they're staying away from the church, why they left. And they give a lot of intellectual reasons. And they're about religion and science, they're about religion and violence, all the things that we deal with all the time. And as I read it, I thought, I don't doubt for a second the sincerity of the people responding. They're telling us why they're leaving. What I was sighing over was the fact that these are very answerable objections. But what's happened, I think, is for the past many years, we've largely dropped the apologetic approach. We've not delved into the richness of our own Catholic intellectual tradition to hang on to our young people. Our young people are leaving in droves. For every one person joining the Catholic Church today, 6 are leaving. And many of them are young people. Many leave in high school and college. They're telling us why they're leaving. And they're very eminently answerable objections. That was my little wake up to, come on, catechists, apologists, theologians, bishops, priests. to hang on to our young people, we got to pick up our game intellectually. You know, the new atheists, look at Hitchens and Dawkins. They're terrific evangelists for their cause. They're smart, they're witty, they use the media effectively, and trust me when I tell you, they got an army of disciples out there among the young. Why aren't we in that game? We got to get in the game with the same intelligence, the same savviness in terms of the media. So that was my little cri de coeur, was we need to pick up our game intellectually to hang on to our young people.
Right. Now, you were mentioning about reaching out as well. Now, we saw the one on Francis, and clearly Francis is probably one of the saints, if not, that's the most relatable outside of the Catholic Church, certainly for Protestants as well. Was that why he was the first one you decided to release? Or was he the first one that actually was produced, or what made that decision?
We wanted very much in this series to show the breadth and depth and variety of the Catholic thing. So, for example, the episode on Thomas Aquinas is much more intellectual. Good, we are an intellectual tradition. The Newman episode is very theological. Good, we're a theological tradition. Francis is very lyrical, very spiritual. Terrific. We got that Michelangelo visual. Terrific. We're a visual religion. Catholicism has what I call a grandma's attic quality. You know, like there's everything up there in grandma's attic. We never throw anything away. That's the beauty of it. And we can call upon all these different dimensions. And we should do it in this deft manner. You know, so what's going to draw someone in? For some people, it might be the ideas. Others, it might be the visual. Others, it might be the lyrical, the spiritual. Great, we got it all. Let's use it.
It's interesting, too, because you also pointed out in the Francis program, talking about the fact that the image that people have of Francis, and I could relate certainly growing up in the 60s and 70s, the Brother, Sun, Sister, Moon, kind of hippie-like fellow, along with either, you know, talking to the flowers or else being anti-establishment.
Right.
Now, both of those images, in many ways, appealed to a lot of young people from my generation. Has that had an impact on the way they think about the church?
Well, I think so. And I wanted to use Francis as a way in, that he is a radical figure, but not in that sort of superficial way. And to get at his radicality, you got to get at Christ. You have to get at detachment, at poverty, at the cross. That's the true radicality. There's a sort of superficial way the culture can read that. And that, I think, produced those two stereotypes that I referred to. But his true radicality, that's going to appeal to everyone today as it appealed to people 800 years ago. That's the power of the gospel, to find those moments.
So are real Christians or Catholics always a little eccentric?
Yeah, I'm with Chesterton. You know, the only people that see the world aright are those that stand on their head, because the world's upside down. You know, and so only when you stand on your head will you actually see it aright. Look at the whole tradition in the Eastern spiritual tradition of the fool for Christ. Well, that's the idea, that the world is foolish through sin. So when we act foolishly in the other direction, we're actually correcting things. Yes, we'll always be eccentric. Look at the cross. We can domesticate it, but the cross is a permanently upsetting reality. The Lord of life came and we killed him. There's one of the earliest charismatic sermons in the Gospels, in the New Testament. Well, that's still of tremendous transformative power today. The Lord of life came and we killed him. That means there's something really off with us. And the cross is a reminder of that. So yeah, I think we should revel in our eccentricity.
Now, Word on Fire itself, as far as the outreach, you got it through the media, but you also make it available through parishes. You work that way with DVDs. You have something called, and I wanted to talk to you, Father Steve, because you're the CEO of Word on Fire Ambassadors. What are those?
Those are particular people who, with the permission of their pastor, will advocate for the kind of Word on Fire vision in their parish setting, so that they will bring the materials, they will distribute the materials, they'll act as an ambassador, really, for Bishop Barron and for Word on Fire products.
And people can actually become that, right? They can go to your website and find out all about that. There's also, is there like a workbook related to the pivotal players? I know there's something Amy Wellborn's putting out.
We have a comprehensive study program
Right.
for all of our video series, all our film series, and that includes a study guide for participants. It includes a leader's guide that helps people to facilitate the study experience. And yes, you mentioned Amy Wellborn created a book of spirituality on the pivotal players. So there's, as I said, there's a comprehensive study program that's available for all of Bishop Barron's film series.
Now, in what you're working on together, do you see the parish, because you're talking about reaching out, but at the same time, that recatechizing, getting into the parish, is that part of your mission?
It's part of our mission. However, it's not the only part of our mission, because all of our materials and our films are designed for the individual as well. So we envision things comprehensively. We can reach individuals, we can reach parishes, and we can reach outside the church.
I've been thrilled with the way it's been used in parishes. I mean, so I love getting out and through PBS and YouTube and all that, but I love the fact the series have been used very widely in parishes, in RCIA, confirmation classes. I just confirmed 3,000 kids out in my pastoral region last spring. And the number of those programs that have used the series, delighted me.
Right, so that's good. Now, in going forward with the pivotal players, and we'll talk more with Matt Leonard's coming on, we'll talk a little more about the productions and how that was done. In you doing it yourself, who did you learn the most about? Or who were you the most surprised by when you actually did the research or went to the locale?
Oh, for the pivotal players themselves, yeah. Because you say Thomas is someone that I've loved and studied, most of my life. In many ways, I would say Catherine of Siena. I knew Catherine's importance. I knew a lot of scholars who had admired her. I had not studied her that carefully. And so reading about her was a great eye-opener, but also going to her places. And just delving into her spirituality, I would say was something very new and fresh for me. And I've got a completely renewed sense of the importance of Catherine of Siena.
Now, you kind of talk about Thomas, since we're talking about him just before the break, as kind of like your spiritual guide, advice. How do you view him in your life?
Oh, he's for me, the pivotal player, because I'm sitting here with you now wearing a Roman collar because of Thomas Aquinas. I discovered him when I was 14 years old, when a young Dominican friar at Fenwick High School taught us the arguments for God's existence. And I was a Catholic kid going to Mass on Sunday, but I wasn't very interested in religion, really, and it just was like a bell going off. Mm-hmm. And so Thomas was the way in for me. It was the way the door opened. And I walked down that path, and I've never really stopped. Mm-hmm. And it's brought me literally to sitting right here with you. And then most of my academic work has been in Aquinas. I did my doctoral work in Aquinas. Most of my books have been in some way either directly or indirectly about him. So yeah, he's in my own life the pivotal player.
It's interesting too, because you make a point, I believe, in that program about arguing about his position as a philosopher in history versus his position as a theologian.
Yeah, and that's, I would say first and foremost, he's a theologian, and press that even, he's a Bible commentator. He's a magister sacrae paginae, is how the medievals referred to the Paris professors. He was a master of the sacred page. If you're a master of the sacred page, well, then of course you're going to become a Bible commentator. If you're a Bible commentator, you'll become a theologian, because the Bible commentary brings up all kinds of questions. Once you're a theologian, you're going to want to summarize your theology. So Thomas writes these two great summae, these summaries of theology. Most of us read excerpts of the summae, but you forget what that was coming from was a Bible commentator who wanted to preach. He's, of course, a member of the Order of Preachers. So I would say that, first and foremost, he's a Bible man. He's trying to explicate the biblical page. And from that comes his theology.
Okay, very good. With that being said, we have to take a break, a short break that is, and we'll return. We'll continue our conversation with Bishop Barron and be joined now by Matt Leonard, Director of Catholicism, the Pivotal Players. Stay with us on this special edition, very special edition of EWTN's Bookmark, coming to you from the Christ Cathedral campus in Orange County, California, featuring Word on Fire Ministries. Take a look at this clip.
Is there a more winsome and beguiling figure in the entire history of the Catholic Church than Francis of Assisi? Even for non-believers, Francis seems to sum up what is best in the Christian tradition. And it would be difficult to find anyone, even the most ardent of atheists, who would stand against him. Il poverello, the little poor man, simple, humble, close to nature, deeply in love with God, continues to sing across the ages to our own cynical time.
And welcome back to a very special edition of EWTN's Bookmark, coming to you from the Freed Performing Arts Theater on the Christ Cathedral campus right here in Orange County, California. I'm Doug Keck, and we're talking, of course, with Bishop Robert Barron, who's the Auxiliary Bishop of Los Angeles, and of course the host, creator of Catholicism and Pivotal Players. And now we're joined on set by Mr. Matt Leonard, who's the Director of Catholicism and of Pivotal Players. Thank you so much, Matt, for joining us here. Thank you so much, Bishop, as we continue. Now, I wanted to ask Matt right up front, so what happened in Mrs. Lincoln's 8th grade class?
Oh, wow. That was a curveball. It was, I grew up with video equipment. My dad was a reporter for the Today Show for 30 plus years.
That was Mike Leonard, right?
Correct. Right. And so there was editing equipment and all that stuff around, and we had to do a project. It was just a presentation in Mrs. Lincoln's 8th grade class. And I was like, well, can I do a video? And she was like, well, I guess. And I did it, and then I realized that got me out of doing papers, that got me doing, I could just do this video. And so high school, anytime it was like, hey, there's a presentation, it was like, can I do a video? And it helped me skate right through grade school, high school, and beyond.
Right. And so how did you get teamed up?
I was helping out at Sacred Heart Parish in Hubbard Woods, outside Chicago. And I met Matt's dad, Mike, at church. And we were thinking about the Catholicism series in a very kind of abstract way. And I approached him and said, now, you know this whole world. I mean, what would it cost to do something like this? So he sort of gave me some rough ideas. And he goes, my son, Matt, actually runs our picture show production company. Mm-hmm. So then we met and started talking about the Catholicism series. And then we were able to raise the money and get it off the ground. And then off we went around the world. So I've been with Matt now for how many, 5-6 years, traveling literally all over the world. But I met him first through his dad, and several really good conversations we had about media, television, evangelization, using it for the sake of the church and all that. And then we've just had a great collaboration these past many years.
Have you found it to be the case, as you've reached out and done more, that there are plenty of talented Orthodox Catholics with media experience, other production experience out there, who are looking for opportunities to contribute? They'd like to be able to do something that they feel has meaning in their lives, but they haven't seen the platform. Have you found that?
Yeah, I have found that, and I've also found, because Matt will come with us, of course, and our cameraman, John Cummings, will come with us. We usually hire sound people when we get to the place, And I've been very intrigued by some of the outsiders who've joined us. And they'll travel around a site with us, and we'll do all this filming, and how they get intrigued by the faith, and they get kind of drawn in. And some have been reawakened in their faith. Some have begun to think about it for the first time. So I have found that you do have Orthodox Catholics want to get involved, but also fallen away Catholics, non-believers. Just get intrigued. Once you go to these places and you start talking about these figures, they get intrigued.
Now, as far as when you're deciding the Pivotal Players, you got the 6 scripts done and you went ahead and started shooting. Now, you can't be there, I'm assuming, the whole time. A lot of times in film, they have what's called a second unit group or whatever. So is that what you do? Do you guys go and shoot like the backdrop material ahead of time based on a shooting script that you both work on?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have, we have a plan. We have all our locations set up, and we will go and shoot all the visuals. And then Bishop Barron will join us when we're done with that, and then we'll just knock through all his stand-ups. And he's so good. I mean, part of the reason we can do this is because In these spaces, we have such a limited amount of time. I mean, a lot of these chapels, a lot of these locations are like, you have 1 hour.
That's right.
To set up.
At 3 o'clock in the morning. Sometimes.
Or you got to deal with all the people here.
Right,
You've
right.
got 1 hour, and we're so fortunate that he can just go up, and a lot of those, a lot of what you saw is 1-2 takes, and then we're out of
So
there.
that's Bishop One Take is your nickname then, is that what I heard?
Pretty much.
One take, Bob. Big
I also thought it was interesting in watching the format of the program because you do a great way of being a teaching piece, but an entertainment piece because it's so beautiful. And at the same time, you also have this off-the-cuff kind of off-camera question, which that's your voice,
Yes,
right, Matt?
yeah.
Okay, when you ask those questions, are those all predetermined before you went there? Are those something you work out while you're doing the production? Do you throw out questions that the bishop hasn't expected yet for you just to see what works best?
Kind of all of the above. There are some that, when I read the script that I go, I sort of want to ask about this, or I'd like a little bit more clarification on this. And then some, when we get there, I'll just sort of think of something and throw it out there. And that's, again, what's great about Bishop Barron is he's got an answer for everything. He's not stumped me yet.
And you haven't stumped him?
No.
That began with Matt's dad, Mike, on the first series. So he was traveling with us, and we were trying to kind of feel our way, how to do this, So I do the formal stand-ups, and Mike always had this sense of kind of capturing the moment, So he'd say, come over here. And we get a smaller camera. You would usually hold that camera, a smaller one. And he'd say, I got a question. And we'd start talking. But we were filming them in kind of a casual way. And then we found those would be really neat to put into the show itself. And it kind of breaks up the rhythm a little bit. And so we just continue with that. And I might get some vague idea from you, like, I want to talk to you more about miracles or something. But then I don't know the question coming. That's
Right.
the whole idea, is to be a little
Make it a little more spontaneous and,
right.
and kind of reflective even for you, right?
Right. And we're hoping that Matt's kind of the, everyman who's like, well, what would the average person be thinking about this, and what kind of questions would come up? So you're the voice of the people.
Clearly.
Here.
Now, let's talk about some of the other pivotal players. One of them is St. Catherine of Siena, and we talk about her. Now, she talks about taking care of people who are very sick at times, right? And there's one scene in that thing where you talk about how she drinks a particular liquid to demonstrate her relationship to someone that sick. When somebody would hear that who's not Catholic, they might be taken aback by that. What do you say to somebody like that?
Well, it's like Francis. I mean, a lot of what we watch tonight, people would say, what in the world? And why would he do that? And it seems so edgy and so extreme. But that's the thing. See, people like Francis and Catherine awaken us to the supernatural. It's like the famous line with now Mother Teresa being canonized, someone coming to Calcutta and watching her work and saying, I wouldn't do that for $1 million. And she said, neither would I. That it opens you to a different way of imagining the world. And so, gosh, I would never do that kind of, menial attention to someone who's sick. Yeah, but if you're seized by Christ, you would, It's a radicality that opens up because of the gospel. So I like that. There's a kind of slapping the face quality to it that would wake somebody up.
Now, you also did John Henry Newman. So
Yeah.
you went to, I'm assuming, Birmingham and I'm sure you were in Oxford there as well. I forget whether you were at Littlemore or not.
We went to Littlemore. Yeah.
But the thing I was thinking about, I saw you standing there doing that stand-up in front of the Tower Bridge. And I was thinking, I hope you got a permit, because those beefeaters will come right at you.
Yeah.
We're quick. We're really quick. We set up very quick.
We were sitting there, about 10 years ago, we were over there on Marcus Grodi, and we were shooting a stand-up, and out of the corner of my eye, I see this red blur coming at me, and it's this guy in a beefeater outfit telling you, do you have a permit for being here?
He's not just a symbol. I mean,
And I'm like,
really
no,
No, and you're right about the permits, you know that. And we have a great team, so when I write the script, it then goes to Jack Thornton, who's back here in the theater. Jack does a lot of the research. It's like, where would you go to film around these themes? And once all that's done, then it goes to kind of fixer type people to arrange for all that. And yes,
the locale person.
There's a lot of permits involved and so on and so forth. And even with that, you still have issues, But you're right, a lot of the scenes are filmed at 6 in the morning, or they're filmed at noon when these places are shut down.
And we've gotten pretty good too at finding places that are, you see the Tower Bridge, but it's in a really hard to see, you can't see us, we've been able to find sort of these little quiet pockets that still have sort of a nice visual appeal, but you're not going to get a lot of traffic.
Let me ask you, Matt, what of any of the filming and places you went to had the biggest impact, let's say, on your faith walk?
Probably Catherine, for a similar reason as Bishop Barron said in the last segment. It was somebody who I knew about, but I didn't know a lot about, and so just reading his script and hearing the stories and going there and seeing some of the sisters there, it was really inspiring just how much she devoted herself to her faith, and so she probably kind of resonated with me the most.
How about you as a priest with Newman? Does he have an impact on your priesthood and now being a bishop?
Huge, yeah, huge. I first discovered Newman when I was in college, and then I've been reading him ever since. I taught courses in Newman at the seminary for years, and going to his room, in the room where he died in Birmingham, which they've kept exactly as it was when he died, and you could, palpably sense his presence there. That deeply moved me to go there. Newman, I find, is one of the most helpful people in the debates today, because Newman had such a balance and such a breadth of perspective. And his great claim that my whole life has been a battle against liberalism in matters of religion, by which he meant the view that there's no truth in matters of religion. And that is extremely relevant to our time, because so many people think religion, well, it's some expression of your feeling. It's an expression of your subjective convictions, and you have your thing, I got my thing. Newman knew about the objectivity of religious claims and cared deeply about them. And so thinking these things through carefully, that was his whole life. We need that in spades today. We're battling the same thing in many ways. So Newman, I just find, as a go-to person again and again. And going to his places, especially at Oxford, were very moving.
Right. Another connection, still in England, G.K. Chesterton, of course, and you talk about pithy statements and things like that. Now, is it true, in the video you were talking about the fact in the program Pivotal Player that he was the second one named Defender of the Faith?
Yeah,
is
after Henry VIII.
After Henry VIII.
Yeah. And he deserves it. Chesterton is one of the great evangelists, and the title we used for him was The Evangelist, because especially for our time, I think Chesterton is of enormous value. First, because of his joy. He's the happy warrior. He took on the enemies of the faith, and he did it with great intellectual verve, but also with joy. And his famous battles with George Bernard Shaw, whom he disagreed with completely at the intellectual level, but the two of them would end the day by drinking together and singing together, and he's a great model of the happy warrior in evangelization. But also Chesterton saw the trouble with our time was a kind of insanity, that our rationalism had made us insane. And so he says, knock a few holes in your head, it lets in the light. What he meant was what Charles Taylor, the Catholic philosopher, talks about, the buffered self, right? The self that's protected from any contact with the supernatural. Chesterton was battling the buffered self 100 years ago and was trying to knock holes in it to let in the light of the supernatural, which would actually make us sane. The claim was, oh no, you supernatural people are insane. We rationalists are sane. He was saying au contraire, And I think that's still a very valuable message today.
Mm-hmm. So did you have to stand around in the middle of the street and almost get hit by a car shooting the scene where he talks about his absent-mindedness?
There were fortunately little islands that we sort of, and I think that actually was John, our very talented cinematographer, just took his tripod out, and again, he's very quick and just gets the shot, and then we move on.
You also quoted Chesterton talking about what a madman is.
Yeah, and that's the line, really, is that a madman is not someone who's lost his reason. A madman is someone who's lost everything but his reason. And see, that's dead right. Because Chesterton had reason. Chesterton was one of the smartest people of the 20th century and used his mind with this sort of rapier skill. But at the same time, he had everything else, too. He had the heart, he had the soul, he had the spirituality. And that's what made him sane. That's what made him balanced. And he felt that a madman was someone that lost everything except his obsessive reason. And he thought the modern perspective amounted to a circling around a few simple ideas in an obsessive way. And that's why he hated modern determinism. He wanted to open this up and re-enchant the world. Again, there's Charles Taylor, that we live in a disenchanted world. Chesterton saw that 100 years ago. We need to re-enchant it and knock a few holes in our head to let in the light. That remains permanently valuable.
It's interesting, too, to realize that he gave those lectures, 36 of them, at Notre Dame, right?
Yeah, we filmed at the University of Notre Dame because Chesterton came, and I love those stories. It was toward the end of his life, and of course he was always this big man, but he was especially big at the end of his life. And they say when he arrived for the lectures, he's in one of those old cars from the 1930s, and they'd open the door, and the students gathered around because he had to sort of rock to get himself out of the car. And then when he did, he got out. They said it was like the successful launching of a battleship. And the students would all applaud, you know. The famous story there is he was trying to get out, and one of the students said, perhaps you should try to go sideways. And he said, my dear, I have no sideways. You know. So anyway, I love all that about. So I was happy to film at Notre Dame.
Now with Chesterton also, we think about him like the everlasting man is one of the three you mentioned. But the other two are surprising in the sense of thinking about that he wrote about St. Francis and about St. Thomas Aquinas.
Yeah.
Has his writing on those two impacted you?
Yeah, massively. And see, I love establishing a conversation among the pivotal players. So often we'll say, you know, remember as Aquinas said, well, that resonates with Catherine here. And you remember what Chesterton said, that's like Francis. Yes, when I was a kid, a teenager, I would have read Chesterton on both Thomas and Francis, and they permanently influence the way I think about them. I'm with Etienne Gilson, the great Thomist scholar, who said, you know, I've spent my whole life reading Thomas in a scientific way, and here comes this jolly journalist, you know, from England, who writes the best book on Thomas Aquinas. And I think that's still largely right, you know, so yes, both those books influenced my reading of those two great saints.
Let's move on to Michelangelo, because, and you asked the question, I'm watching it and thinking, this is very interesting, it's very nice. I didn't know about his mother's early death. There's some information about that, some of the impact on his life. Was it Savonarola and the impact that had as well on him, which I wasn't aware of. But I was thinking about how beautiful the things are, but all that time you spent in the Sistine Chapel, and I'm thinking of the poor production team who had to work that out. How difficult was that?
It was, you know, we're very lucky in that the team that we have, that we're a part of, is very, very good. So it was very stressful. You know, we had, I think, was it 3 hours? Which to shoot 15 to 17 minutes of content, that's not a lot of time at all. So we had 3 cameras going. We had to shoot Bishop Barron doing stand-ups while we were filming other things at the same time. So we'd have to position the camera this way so you wouldn't see the cameras in the background. So it was stressful, but at the same time, it wasn't. Everybody just the people we work with are so good that helps a lot. You know, to ease the stress.
Well, one of the things in talking about also in understanding about Michelangelo and that point that I was alluding to was, and you asked that question, you said, what is he doing among pivotal players? You're thinking of saints and people like that and great popes. Michelangelo, obviously unbelievable, but why?
Because the beauty is a route of access to the transcendent. So the philosophers talk about the good, the true, and the beautiful, or the three transcendentals. Wherever you find being, you find those three things. And all three have been used by the tradition. Aquinas is by way of the truth. Someone like Francis, by way of the good. Michelangelo shows the beautiful is a route of access to God. Through beautiful things, we come to a knowledge of the source of beauty, the iconic tradition. And that's how I begin that episode, by going back to the iconoclast controversy. There was a moment, a literally pivotal moment, when we could have gone the other way, when there was this desire to smash the pictures, smash the icons. And thank God, John of Damascus won the day. And because of that victory, we get eventually Chartres Cathedral and Michelangelo. We get these great iconic representations of the sacred. That's why I put him in there. Also because I've been studying Michelangelo all my life, since I read The Agony and the Ecstasy when I was a teenager. You know, I've loved Michelangelo.
I saw the movie.
And it's a great movie with Charles Neston. But you hardly ever get a theological reading of Michelangelo. But here's the greatest artist in the West, and almost exclusively his subject matter is Christianity. But you get discussions of, Renaissance humanism, about his anatomical studies, about his realism, et cetera, et cetera. But hardly anyone ever talks about his Christology. But I think Christology runs right through Michelangelo, including and especially the David. So David precisely as a precursor of Christ. Christ the son of David, Christ the new David. See, once you get that, then that statue opens up in a whole new way. Same with the Pietà, same with the Sistine Chapel. My memory of that night was when Matt was setting up the next shot, I was able to lie on the floor. And, when you're in the Sistine Chapel with 10,000 people and you're looking up at...
Right.
But that night, there's only a handful of us there. And when you lie on the floor and you could spend 5 minutes, then you get it. It's like I get the whole logic of it,
Well, it's interesting, too, because you talked about the time difference that he worked on it, the difference between the ceiling and like the Final Judgment, right?
That's right. I mean, so the younger Michelangelo, more at the height of the Renaissance, there's a serenity and a lyricism and a confidence you see in the ceiling. But by the time he gets to the Judgment, a lot has happened in Europe, including the sack of Rome, including, of course, the Reformation and all that followed that. And you see it in those kind of darker and more royaled figures on the far wall. And so you can notice something has changed in the European spirit from the ceiling to the wall.
Right, and also it was the papal MC who gave him a hard time about too many nudes in some of the...
Right.
Who ended up, he was in some part of hell,
in the corner of hell, yeah. And the famous story is that the man went to the Pope himself and said, do something about this. And the Pope said, not even the Pope has power over, hell. And so there's the poor man to this day in the corner of hell,
In our closing minutes talking about it, we've got the first 6 that are out. What are the next 6 that you've already been working on? Let's go through those quickly.
Yeah, I've got 4 scripts now finished, and they are on Ignatius of Loyola, Bartolome de las Casas, St. Augustine, and St. Benedict. So I'm trying to do a sweep of the whole history of the church. So I want some ancient, patristic figures and coming up through the Middle Ages into the early, then to the early modern, now contemporary. So hence going back to Augustine and Benedict. I'm also hopeful I could do St. Irenaeus, who's one of my great theological
heroes. He was
heroes.
one of the ones you first mentioned when you first talked about doing it.
Yeah, and we've been postponing him in some ways because he's more difficult to film. There's so little you know about Irenaeus, and there are so few sites associated with him, clearly. There's a lot you could say about him. He's very influential today, but the filming will be more challenging. A final one, if we can get around to it, is Flannery O'Connor. Now, I realize she's not maybe at the level of a Thomas Aquinas or Michelangelo, but she's one of my great heroes, and I think a very pivotal figure in the 20th century. So we'll see. I've got 4 finished. It depends partially on money. It depends partially on time. It's funny, when I was watching the Francis episode, that was filmed about 2 weeks before I got a call telling me I'm becoming a bishop in Southern California. I had no idea that was coming. And there I'm talking about, accepting God's will.
I was going to say.
Not about me. And I thought, little did you know, pal, what was coming in 2 weeks, Anyway.
Well, let me ask you, too, is there anybody around today, I mean, we're coming up on, we just had the canonization, when this is airing, of Mother Teresa, Teresa of Calcutta. I would think she might be considered a pivotal player. Are there others in the last period of time that you might consider pivotal players for the future?
A handful, and I think she's one, and Matt remembers this. We were filming in Matt, of course.
Yeah.
We were filming in Calcutta, and at the tomb of Mother Teresa, and I remember thinking, they'll be coming here in 1,000 years. So there we were just a few years after her death, but I thought, they'll be coming here as they come now to the tomb of Francis of Assisi. She will certainly be, I think, a pivotal player. John Paul, too, will be a pivotal player, seems to me. Theologically, in the 20th century, I would say, if anyone, Hans Urs von Balthasar would be a pivotal player. You could point it to Lubach, people like that. But I think of all of them, Balthasar would be the one that will be read in 500 years or 1,000 years. Anyway, those are a handful. It's always dicey to predict who among our present Fulton Sheen, I think, is a very important player. He preached here at the Crystal Cathedral back in the 1970s. He was a hero of Robert Schuller. I think Sheen, certainly in the 20th century, was a pivotal player. But it's hard to predict, isn't it, of our contemporaries, besides Matt, but you know.
Well, I'm a little biased, but Mother Angelica might be one down the road that we can think about as well,
I agree.
of course. But,
there are some very important players, and it takes time to take in the full stature of people, you know, but yeah,
exactly.
Holy Spirit never gives up on us.
So when do you find the time now, being a bishop, you've moved out here, you're in Santa Barbara, right? So you're actually at the mission that was founded in, 1786. It's still the only one, I think, run by the Franciscans still, right?
They're still a very lively.
So you're there. How do you find the time to do everything you're asked to do now?
Well, it's because I have these great teams helping me. It is more complicated. I'm the regional bishop of the Santa Barbara Pastoral Region. I'm an auxiliary of Los Angeles. I've got speaking responsibilities too around the country, and then the Word on Fire work. But thank God, Father Steve and many of our team members who are here, they really keep it going. I have to do a column every week, which we turn into a video typically. I do a homily every week that we will podcast. I do a podcast show, but from my office I can do that. So it doesn't take too much time. The difficulty I find now is I have less time for reading and for kind of the serious study, which I've done for many years. But you can't do everything, and so you try to prioritize. It's all a joy. It's just a question of finding the right balance.
Let me ask you also, Matt, when you're going out on a shoot like for the upcoming ones that have been written, how far ahead do you spend time planning that out before you actually go and start executing that?
A long time, and that again is with the great help of the Word on Fire team. Jack Thornton does a lot of the prep work and gives me this highly organized binder with full color pictures of all these possible locations and dates and years, and so we spend a lot of time going over that and figuring out, and then talking to the people, what can we film, what's going to be open, what's going to be closed, what's our schedule. So yeah, a significant chunk of time is just planning the actual shoot. So when we get there, because we need to be quick, we're not sitting around going, oh, should we do this? Should we do it? We have a pretty solid game plan once we get there.
Right. And then you can arrive at a spot and there's a dog barking. And you've done all this work and there's a dog barking. And I remember one time we had to send one of our fixers, could you talk to the lady? And she goes up there and and they got the dog something. Because he would spend all this time.
Skateboarders, remember the skateboarders?
Skateboarders in Paris. You spend all this time and money and then there's someone who's just goofing around or making noise.
Well, if Francis can calm a wolf Gubbio down,
that's right.
You should be able to handle
I'm
a
not
dog.
as Francis though, yeah.
At least you should be able to do that.
Yeah.
So just before we go, any words of encouragement for young people out there, for the church, for what you're seeing, and for where you see pivotal players playing a role?
I'm very encouraged by the response to a lot of the work that we do, especially with the YouTube videos. I still get, people with angry questions and angry comments. Good. I'm reaching out beyond the walls of the church. But time and again, every day, we get responses from young people who are, they're coming back to the faith, or they're re-intrigued, or the door is opened again. The Catholicism series, I know, has had a big impact on a lot of people, and it's because of the beauty of it, as Father Steve was saying. It's the beauty of it, I think, intrigues them enough to say, okay, I'll give it another look. So I find it very encouraging, actually, as I watch young people respond to this. Augustine was right. I mean, everybody's hungry for God. Everyone's got a hungry heart. Bruce Springsteen said it, and St. Augustine said it. But it's true. Everyone's got a heart that's hungry finally for God. And so that we should take as fundamental. And you can see evidence of it everywhere.
All right. And evidence of the support for the fine work you're doing. Thank you so much. We're just out of time. Thank you very much, Bishop Van, for hosting us here, and obviously for Bishop Barron and for Matt and for Father Steve. Keep up the great work. Just remind everybody as well that the Diocese of Orange's 40th anniversary is this year, and EWTN will be proud to bring the Mass on September 18th live from the Christ Cathedral campus. And we want to thank everybody from Word on Fire Catholic Ministries. We want to thank the audience here as well. And I'm Doug Keck. Thank you so much for the special edition of EWTN Bookmark, all about Bishop Barron's new pivotal players. Thank you so much. See you next time.